In this video, I will overview some characteristics of national datasets, particularly national educational surveys, and some of the preparation steps you need to perform to obtain data and analyze data from them. So it's very advantageous to use national datasets for educational research and researching other areas. They provide a large number of variables which allows testing complex hypotheses, including mediation or moderation. You can also perform research which provides results that generalize to the entire US population, giving you strong external validity. Now, this depends if you are analyzing entire samples from the national dataset, or you are obtaining specific subsamples. Each dataset is designed to generalize to certain populations, but not for others. So if you select a specific subsample from the dataset that the dataset is not designed to generalize to, then you wouldn't be able to have that advantage. Now, national datasets are very large, so depending on your hypothesis, you may have very large power to detect an effect. And validity and reliability could be strong because the datasets and the surveys are well developed. Now, there are also some limitations. You may have some specific research hypotheses for which there aren't variables that match the hypothesis exactly. So you would have to use the variables available, which will create a limitation. Also, there are many national datasets are cohort-based, and the cohort is surveyed multiple times, which allows you to do longitudinal studies. However, sometimes from one wave to another, the survey organization decides to remove some questions and modify some questions, so your ability to do longitudinal research may be limited because some variables changed from year to year. Okay. Now, some variables may be scaled or only available in aggregated time, and if you are measuring latent variables, there may be too few indicators of latent variable, or they may not be strong indicators. So typically, with a scale that was specifically developed to measure a construct and well validated, if you fit, for example, a confirmatory factor analysis, you would expect strong factor loadings above 0.7. But with national surveys, you may have weak factor loadings because the survey was not specifically designed to measure that latent variable. You are adapting the existing questions to measure the latent variable. These are some questions that you should consider when trying to decide to use a national dataset. Does the dataset contain the variables that I need to test my hypothesis? Was the data collection from a population of interest? When was it collected? Is it too old? Has the population substantially changed? Some datasets are public. You can just download from the website. Some are restricted. You have to submit a form and go through a process. Some go as far as requiring you to have the dataset in a room without internet and with limited access. So it's important to check what are the rules for using the data. Does the dataset require you to submit any papers that you produce with the dataset for review before you publish it, which may slow down your research process? What's the documentation? National datasets are usually very well documented, but the documentation may be spread across multiple manuals, particularly if you're using multiple waves of survey. There may be multiple manuals that you may have to consult, or there may be a cross-sectional manual and a separate longitudinal manual. which formats the data is available, like does it provide CSV, does it provide SPSS datasets, sometimes it's Excel, it varies greatly. And what is the level of technical assistance? Is there an email, phone number you can call to ask questions? These are some sources commonly used for educational datasets. ICPSR is one that has dozens of datasets. The National Center for Educational Statistics, U.S. Census Bureau, National Center for Health Statistics, and the state level Department of Education also have some public data, but also some restricted data that you may be able to request. Specifically for the National Center for Educational Statistics, which is a major provider in the dataset, they have survey areas, which includes multiple surveys, so elementary secondary surveys, post-secondary surveys. Some of these are cohorts that are followed over multiple years. Some of these obtain a new nationally representative sample each time the survey is implemented. Some of these are single-shot surveys. There are also longitudinal surveys, educational assessments, which are done with a different sample. Some of these, like NAEP, are Congress mandated, and they're very sophisticated and represent the national population. Library surveys, and there are some international comparisons as well. To prepare for survey data analysis, first thing to do is to review the documentation of the dataset. And again, there may be just one technical manual, there may be multiple, there may be a technical manual per wave of the survey. Check what the survey design is. Is it a multi-stage sampling? Most of them will be multi-stage stratified sampling. They all use complex survey designs. You will not see much of simple random sampling. And there may be more than one weight. Weights are specifically developed based on variables of interest, and they can account for no response in different ways. If it's a longitudinal data set, there will be different weights depending on which waves you use. If there are multiple respondents, if there's like student assessments, parent assessments, principal assessments, teacher assessments, there will be different weights depending on whether you just want to use student assessments or student and parent assessments or just teacher assessments. So it's important there. Typically, there will be a table of weights. Now, if there is a sophisticated sampling method, there will be strata or clusters IDs. Sometimes instead of strata or cluster IDs, there will be replication weights, and that is because replication weights can replace the need for strata and cluster IDs. And sometimes only strata and cluster IDs are only available in restricted data sets, but replication weights are available in public data sets. And if they have replication weights in particular, there will be recommendations to use the weights. So for example, if it's weights for jackknife, they will explain how to use them, or balanced repeated replication. Some data sets will have missing values in them. Some will have already imputed missing values with methods such as hot deck imputation, and they will explain this in the documentation. Typically, those that have imputed missing values, they will also include variables that indicate which values were imputed. So for preparation for analysis, you consult the documentation first, identify correct sampling weights for analysis, then you identify strata and cluster IDs or replication weights if strata and cluster IDs are not available. And if there is missing data, how you're going to handle it, such as using multiple imputation. Then you create a data set with variables of interest. Some data sets, such as the National Longitudinal Survey of the Earth, has a very nice graphic user interface for you to pick variables and download the data set. Once that is done, you have to obtain some descriptive statistics. Now, make sure that every ID available, such as individual IDs, cluster IDs, and strata IDs, you should download, and also download the weights that are pertinent to your particular analysis. You have to examine that information, so obtain descriptive statistics of weights, of strat IDs, ABC values. For examining weights, first, be careful because there can be dozens of weights in a large data set, particularly a national data set. Once you download the weights, check them. Do they have a mean of 1, which means they have already been normalized to sum to the sample size? That's rare. They usually raw weights. They typically sum to the population size. You should check extreme weights, then you should normalize them. There may be weights of 0, which means that those individuals in any analysis you run, they will not count. If there are weights of 0, check why these weights are 0. If you have extreme weights, they will affect the variance. Then look at strata and cluster. So they may call the cluster primary sampling unit. If it's a multi-stage sample and there are primary sample unit IDs, PSU IDs, it means that the just ID of the cluster that was selected first. It's very common that if there are PSU IDs, if it's a multi-stage sample with primary sample units and the secondary sample units, the dataset will only make available PSU IDs, and you can use those for analysis. Then sometimes replicate weights are provided instead of PSU and strat IDs, and that's for reasons of confidentiality. If replication weights are provided, you can use them for either jackknife or balanced repeated replication. The manual of the survey will explain which of these methods you should be using with those replicate weights.